longevity resulting from 3 lifestyles, and to biomarkers across 2 nations and 1 individual patient number 1512, BPT070, January 23, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category, Longevity and Lifestyle. Preface, at 5:30 am this morning, I woke up thinking about a simple question. Why do Japanese people have the longest lifespan among advanced nations, while Americans are near the opposite end? An analogy from my own health history immediately came to mind. My health journey reflects 3 distinct phases. I began as a Taiwanese youngster, then lived a typical American lifestyle from age 22 in 1969 to age 66 in 2013, and finally transitioned toward a Japanese-style senior life from age 67 in 2014 to my current age of 79 in 2026. During this long path, between ages 47 in 1994 and 78 in 2025, I experienced 9 near-death mortality events. I survived all of them. Since 2010, I have devoted more than a full-time effort 13 to 14 hours a day and every day to self-study and research in health and medicine. My goal has been clear: to reach at least the level of Japanese longevity, and if possible, to exceed the Japanese average lifespan of 84.5 years and live beyond 90, which is now my personal target. This study is intended to uncover and illustrate this unique longevity journey, using my own life trajectory as a living comparison across cultures, lifestyles, and time. Introduction. First, I compare American and Japanese lifestyles using an engineering framework with 1 output strain and 5 input stresses. I treat life expectancy, or lifespan, as the output strain. The 5 input stresses are 3 key lifestyle and 2 metabolic factors: food portion size, defined as overall daily food energy exposure in kcal per person, carbs and sugar intake per meal in grams. Daily exercise, with emphasis on walking for senior leg strength. Obesity, represented by body weight in pounds, and diabetes, represented by daily average glucose levels. This is fundamentally a pattern recognition problem. Perfect causal proof for every individual link is not required to observe repeated and consistent directional patterns across national data. However, I can conduct a much deeper analysis on my own body, because I have the rare persistence to collect, calculate, and process more than 4 million personal data points over the past 16+ years. These descriptions avoid overclaiming. They explain why national data can reveal direction but not trajectory, and why my personal big dataset can reveal both. The logic flows naturally from comparison to justification, and it matches my personal life story and research philosophy. Dataset description. First, the strain signal is clear. Japan has one of the longest life expectancies in the world, while the United States is about 6 years shorter. In the US, life expectancy at birth was 78.4 years in 2023. In comparable high-income countries, the average was about 82.5 years, and Japan typically sits at the top of that group at about 84.5 years. This multi-year gap is large in public health terms, and it has persisted for years. Therefore, this longevity gap must have practical reasons behind it, and I will try to uncover those reasons step by step. Now I connect this output strain difference to the 5 input stresses. Stress 1, food portion, interpreted as total daily food energy exposure, a practical quantitative proxy for national portion pressures per capita food energy supply. One OECD country analysis reported 2019 food supply levels around 3,860 kcal per capita per day for the United States versus 2,691 kcal per capita per day for Japan. This is a difference of about 1,171 kcal per day, or roughly 43% higher food energy supply in the US relative to Japan. Even if an individual does not eat all supplied calories, the food environment matters because it shapes default portion sizes, snacking frequency, and how often calorie-dense options are present. In a pattern sense, the US environment pushes portion stress upward, while Japan pushes it downward. Stress to the C and S grams, interpreted as refined carbohydrate and added sugar load. For the US, CDC data report that in 2017 to 2018, adults consumed an average of 17 teaspoons of added sugar per day. Using the common conversion of 1 teaspoon equals about 4 grams, this corresponds to about 60 H per day of added sugar. This figure reflects only added sugar, not total carbohydrate intake. For Japan, multiple adult datasets show much lower free sugar intake. One Japanese adult study reported mean free sugar intake of about 26.8 grams per day, approximately 7.8% of total energy. Another adult cohort report cited free sugar intake around 29 g per day in men and women. Although these numbers vary slightly across studies, they cluster in a narrow range of roughly 27 to 30 grams per day, which is about 60% lower than the US added sugar estimate near 68 g per day. This is a strong and stable pattern. If expressed as a stress ratio, US added sugar exposure is roughly 2.3 to 2.5 times the Japanese free sugar level, even with uncertainty. The direction and scale are consistent. Stress 3, daily exercise, interpreted as daily walking and leg use. A direct pedometer comparison study reported that Americans had lower average steps per day than Japanese participants. About 7,878 steps per day in Americans versus about 9,055 steps per day in Japanese, with fewer Americans reaching 10,000 steps per day. This aligns with broader cultural observations that Japanese daily life includes more walking integrated into transit and errands. In addition, studies of Japanese daily living show that many seniors sit down and stand up about 20 to 30 times per day because of tatami floor seating and the low height of traditional chairs and tables. This repeated movement provides frequent leg muscle activation as part of normal daily life, rather than deliberate exercise. From a strain stress perspective, lower daily steps mean weaker repeated mechanical loading of the legs, lower daily calorie burn, reduced insulin sensitivity stimulus, and less vascular conditioning. Higher steps produce the opposite effects. Again, the pattern aligns in the expected direction. An old Chinese saying states that aging begins with loss of leg strength. Stress for obesity, interpreted as the body mass result of chronic energy imbalance. For the U.S., CDC reports adult obesity prevalence around 40.3% from August 2021 to August 2023. For Japan, multiple sources converge on much lower obesity prevalence using the International BMI greater than or equal to 30 definition, often reported as under 5% overall, with one profile reporting for 0.3% for women and 6.0% for men. This is not a small difference. Depending on the Japanese estimate used, the gap is about 8 to 10 times. Even accounting for BMI limitations and ethnic differences, the magnitude is too large to dismiss. Obesity stress is dramatically higher in the U.S. pattern. Americans are blessed with rich land and abundant harvests, but we often lack the willpower and self-control to restrain ourselves, which has led to today's obesity problem. This has nothing to do with intelligence or knowledge. Everyone likes to eat, and very few people truly enjoy exercising every day. What once seemed like a gift has quietly turned into a burden. In the end, this is not fate or bad luck. It is largely our own doing. Stress 5. Diabetes, interpreted as long-term metabolic overload, and beta cell stressing. International Diabetes Federation country estimates for 2024. Diabetes prevalence in adults is reported as 13.7% in the United States versus 8.1% in Japan. This corresponds to about a 1.7 times higher prevalence in the US. This outcome is consistent with the upstream stresses of higher food energy, higher sugar exposure, lower walking, and higher obesity. A very clear picture starts to emerge. Excessive food portions combined with high sugar intake drive weight gain and then obesity. Obesity leads to type 2 diabetes. Persistent hyperglycemia then drives heart attacks, kidney failure, neuropathy and amputations, retinopathy and blindness, strokes, dementia, and even cancers. Death ultimately results from these mortality diseases. This is an ultra-clear slideshow, or even a full movie, playing out in front of all of us, and I have seen it unfold in my own life. Pattern recognition summary. When these 5 stresses are placed in one integrated picture, the American pattern shows higher upstream load and stronger downstream penalties. Food energy supply, US about 3,860 kcal versus Japan about 2,691 kcal. Approximately 43% higher. Added sugar, US about 68 grams per day versus Japan about 27 to 30 g per day, roughly 2.3 to 2.5 times higher. Walking, US lower daily steps than Japan, about 7,878 versus 9,055 steps per day. Obesity, US about 40% versus Japan under about 5 to 6%. Diabetes, US 13.7% versus Japan 8.1%, about 1.7 times higher. Every one of the 5 stresses points in the same direction. The US environment and metabolic status are under higher chronic stress than Japan. Therefore, it is not surprising that the strain outcome, lifespan, is lower in the US at 78.4 years than in Japan at 84.5 years. This is what engineers call a coherent system pattern, where multiple independent inputs align with the same output direction. I conduct all of my research by first using pattern recognition, followed by a rigorous scientific validation process with quantitative and deterministic expressions, not descriptive narratives. Other important reality check. Life expectancy is not controlled only by these 5 stresses. The US also has higher injury and violence mortality, different opioid and overdose dynamics, and large inequality in access and adherence, all of which can influence lifespan even if diet and exercise were identical. Meanwhile, Japan has its own risks, such as high salt intake and stroke risk in certain contexts, which fall outside these 5 stresses. Still, the lifestyle metabolic pattern remains one of the strongest and most repeatable explanations for the persistent gap. For reference, in US, about 80 to 85% of deaths come from chronic mortality diseases, while about 15 to 20% come from injury, violence, and overdose combined. Therefore, even after including the opioid crisis, chronic metabolic and degenerative diseases kill about 5 times more people than all injuries, violence, and overdoses combined. This ratio is stable, persistent, and not controversial in public health data. Practical conclusion in plain terms: Japan, on average, runs a lower daily metabolic load, smaller overall food energy exposure, lower sugar load, more walking, far lower obesity, and lower diabetes prevalence. The US, on average, runs a higher daily metabolic load, larger energy exposure, higher added sugar, less daily walking, much higher obesity, and higher diabetes prevalence. When this pattern runs for decades, the body pays a long-term price through vascular disease, kidney disease, and metabolic failure, which then lowers lifespan. This is the simplest pattern-consistent explanation. The comparison table shown above uses 2023 data only. It represents a single static snapshot. Similar to a camera picture, this snapshot is useful for background context and broad population comparison. But by itself it cannot explain how health conditions develop, accumulate, or reverse over time. To understand true disease progression and recovery, a time dimension is required. Therefore, in the following sections, I move beyond this static snapshot and apply my 16 years of longitudinal data to conduct a VPT analysis. This transforms the analysis from a still image into a movie show, or more precisely, a 16 consecutive year slideshow, where each frame captures the evolving interaction between behavior, metabolic stress, and physiological strain. Only through this time-based perspective can cumulative damage, partial recovery, path dependence, and irreversible components be properly observed and quantified. This longitudinal VPT analysis forms the core of the following results and interpretations. As shown in this longitudinal analysis, my personal data reveal a continuous trajectory rather than isolated snapshots. This distinction is critical. Most national or population-level datasets, even when collected over many years, still appear as static pictures because nations have large physical, cultural, and economic inertia. As a result, even 17 years of national data from the US or Japan often resemble to relatively stable but different snapshots with limited visible cause and result transitions. In contrast, my personal dataset captures an evolving system. Although it represents only one individual, the internal structure is consistent, the interventions are deliberate, and the behavioral changes are sustained. This allows cause and result relationships to emerge clearly over time, through gradual but persistent lifestyle modifications. The trajectory bends, partially reverses, and stabilizes, making it possible to observe how changes in food intake, physical activity, body weight, and glucose directly reshape aging strain. This is precisely the type of dynamic information that population statistics struggle to reveal. My longitudinal data demonstrate not just where the system is, but how and why it moves. This trajectory-based evidence is difficult to collect, analyze, and present at the national level. Yet it is essential for understanding real physiological adaptation, recovery capacity, and long-term health outcomes. VMT data analysis results. I will keep this section brief in writing. Instead, I rely on deep, insightful data tables and graphic diagrams, using minimal words except where explanation is necessary. Strain and normalization factors of stresses. I selected age difference, health age minus biological age as the output strain. My food portion and carbs sugar amounts were normalized before data entry. Walking was normalized to 7,000 steps per day. Body weight was normalized to 170 pounds. BMI 25. Glucose was normalized to 120 milligrams DL. Detailed explanations of the VMT methodology can be found in my published 2025 papers and in video presentations on YouTube under the Health Talk with EclaireMD channel. VMT stress weighting ratios. Food portion equals 1.0 carbs sugar grams equals 1.0 walking steps equals 7.0 reverse weight LBS equals 170 glucose mg/dl equals 120. VMT analysis results. VMT energy contribution ratios. Food portion equals 20.3% carbs sugar grams equals 21.7% walking steps equals 11.7% weight equals 22.7% glucose equals 23.7%. The weight ranking order is longevity related to mortality, diseases greater than diabetes greater than obesity greater than carbs sugar greater than food portion greater than exercise. 3 pivot years of cumulative VMT energy percentages. 2014 equals 26%, 2015 equals 89%, 2016 equals 92%. More detailed explanation and interpretation of these inflection points are provided in the conclusion section. Conclusion: using quantitative and deterministic analysis, I verified that without my lifestyle changes over the past 16 years, I would likely have died between ages 66 and 68. Instead, I am now 79. This outcome is not accidental. It is the direct result of my medical study and research, data-driven decisions, and sustained personal effort. I am not only the author of these papers. I am the living evidence behind them. I am not claiming immortality, certainty, or universality. I am making a narrower and defensible statement. Without 16 years of deliberate lifestyle modification, my life expectancy trajectory pointed toward death in the late 60s. With those modifications, the longevity trajectory bent. That is a fair systems-level conclusion. In engineering terms, I altered boundary conditions and input stresses early enough to reduce accumulated damage and avoid catastrophic failure. In medical terms, I reduced risk enough to meaningfully extend my life. In human terms, I did the work and lived with discipline. Calling myself living proof is not arrogance. It is an accurate description of a longitudinal and of one system in which the experiment, the intervention, and the outcome all reside in my body. The 2014 to 2016 window is not merely a numerical inflection. It represents a true phase transition in my life trajectory, precisely the type of pivot that time domain cumulative energy analysis is designed to reveal, from 1947 to 1968. My Taiwanese phase was shaped by scarcity, discipline, no car and daily walking, simple food, and a naturally low metabolic load. The cumulative energy slope during this period was shallow because stress inputs were low and my age was young, even without conscious health knowledge. My biosystem remained largely elastic. From 1969 to 2013, after becoming American, my lifestyle gradually shifted toward abundance and convenience, larger food portions, higher carbs and sugar intake, reduced daily movement, and persistent metabolic loading accumulated hidden energy damage slowly but relentlessly. That long, seemingly flat period before 1994 of my first heart attack is deceptive. Energy was being stored quietly rather than released. This is classic viscoplastic behavior. Between 2014 and 2016, that stored energy surfaced. The curve shows an abrupt rise from below 1% during 2010 to 2013 to over 90% cumulative VMT energy by 2016. This was not coincidence. It marked the moment when latent damage crossed a threshold and became visible, measurable, and dangerous. In engineering terms, the system transitioned from elastic accommodation to plastic deformation. After recognizing this reality, I made a deliberate change. From 2016 onward, especially as I approached 2026, I reshaped my boundary conditions. I reduced food portions. I lost 69 pounds of weight, reduced my glucose from over 326 milligrams of DLHbA1c 13% down to 113 milligrams of DLHbA1c 5.6%, maintained sustained daily walking above 10,000 steps, disciplined sleep, and continuously measured my data. I did not attempt to regain youth. Since 2014, I adopted a senior Japanese elongated lifestyle focused on calm, repetition, and low strain rate living. My curves confirmed the outcome. After the pivot, cumulative energy growth nearly stopped, the slope flattened and the system stabilized. Past damage was not erased, but further accumulation was largely prevented. This behavior is exactly what viscoplastic theory predicts and what longevity biomedicine science independently confirms. This conclusion is not metaphorical, it is structural. My Taiwanese youth built my character and resilience. My American adulthood accumulated heavy stresses. My Japanese-style senior living preserved function. The evidence is not in words. It is in the curve and in this article. Even if I were to pass away tomorrow, I would not belong to the earlier death statistics. Of course, I still aim to challenge reaching my 90th birthday. Disclaimer: write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights belong to the author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.